He who has a why to live for can bear almost any hell. Viktor E. Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning. Finally, I'm doing the book review that I had mentioned to you all that I was going to do, and here it is. This book review is to not convince, but persuade you to read this book because I recommend it. Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor E. Frankl. Before I touch into the three main points that I'm going to talk about, I just want to quickly highlight the three main points that I'm going to talk about are just three main points that I feel that stood out for me, or that I feel that were often repeated in this book, because there's so much information here. Let's see. Before I dive into three main points, let's talk about the setting really quick. So Viktor E. Frankl was a well-recognized practicing psychologist. So he was a doctor. And in 1942, him and his family were separated, and they were placed in different concentration camps. He survived 4 different camps, and I feel like him being already a practicing psychologist, I feel that gave him an advantage in surviving these horrific circumstances. And this book is definitely important and can give you value, insight into maybe how you can shift your perspective when you're going through very uncomfortable or circumstances or events in your life that you feel that are, your own definition of unbearable or suffering, or just going through different aspects of your life. So now going to point number 3. Point number 1. So there's 3 main points. Number 1, I just want to quickly highlight the mind shift. So there's two main things that gave him strength, gave him fuel to continue to find a meaning in life and not give up. His strength and pursuit to want to live, because he talks a lot about that, how a lot of people kind of gave up in living, and he still found a meaning to give him strength, to give him that courage to keep pursuing and to keep believing that he was going to survive. Number 1 was reuniting with his family, especially his wife. So thoughts of him reuniting with his wife gave him strength. And then number 2, writing his book Logotherapy, which is a book he wrote before this one, and that gave him strength to continue to pursue, to find that meaning in life. So number 1, that was mind shift. Number 2, he talks about the 3 ways you can find meaning. So there's 3 ways. Number 1, creating a work or doing a deed. For example, maybe the job you do is gives you meaning in life, or a deed, maybe you volunteer. Number 2, experiencing something or encountering someone. So maybe experiencing something, maybe you do an annual trip every year, once a year, you travel to a different country, maybe that gives you meaning in life. Or encountering someone, maybe that can mean your significant other. Number 3, the attitude we take towards unavoidable suffering. There's suffering that is unavoidable, and he talks about you can find meaning in that. For example, in the book, he talks about a gentleman who went through an accident and he was paralyzed from the neck down, and he found meaning by empowering other people who were living through that same situation he was, and that gave him meaning. And okay, so that was point number 2. And then point number 3 is suffering. So he talks about tragic optimism, which I just want to mention it. I think you should Google it and read about it, but it ties into suffering. So suffering, there's unavoidable suffering and just suffering that you can't avoid. So he talks about, like, if there's suffering that you can avoid, it's really masochistic of one to keep going through that suffering, even if there's a way out. But he talks about suffering that is unavoidable. So like I just mentioned, there's suffering, for example, there's chronic illnesses, there's accidents, there's basically circumstances that you have no control over, but that you can shift that. You can shift that perspective, as I previously mentioned in the example. And I wanted to talk about suffering in its own main point, because their suffering comes in many shapes, sizes, forms. Everybody has their own form of suffering, but he talks about this in a way of not putting yourself as a victim, but you as a warrior, a champion in overcoming and not letting that suffering bring you down, or be what doesn't give you meaning to life, to make you want to survive, and in that order you're helping others as well. So that was point number 3. And yeah, I just want to quickly highlight those 3 main points. There's so much that we can talk about this. There's even an argument, a fairly well-known psychologist called Rollo May made the argument that he didn't agree with Viktor's logotherapy, because he felt that it was taking away the power of the person deciding their own meaning of what it is. There's different arguments, different opinions, different theories, but what I took from it was mainly those 3 main points that I just mentioned, which is the mind shift, changing your perspective. Number 2, there's different ways you can find meaning in life. You have your own definition of what your meaning in life is. And 3, suffering. Suffering happens, for humans, and it's part of life, but there's some that we can avoid and there's some that we can't. So I highly recommend reading this book, A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. If you end up reading this book because of this book review, let me know. If you read it, let me know in the comments. Or let me know anything that stood out, anything that you feel that is flawed, or anything that you agree with, that you absolutely love. And yeah, thank you for watching this quick book review. There's another book review coming soon. I'm currently reading a book by Esther and Jerry Hicks, I believe that's the name. I won't reveal the title yet, which I think I've already posted like a little quote, so you already might know what I'm talking about. But yeah, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor E. Frankl.